Thanks for tuning in at Brackeys.
Hello everyone and welcome to this video on creating a tower defense game in Unity. Today we are going to be adding some functionality for selling turrets. 2 videos ago we made some functionality for selecting turrets on the map, and a node UI would pop up with 2 different buttons, one for upgrading the turret and one for selling it. And in the last video we made all the functionality for upgrading the turret, so in this one we are going to be making the stuff that will allow us to remove the turret off our map and in return get some sum of money. We'll also be adding the upgraded versions of the missile launcher and the laser beamer, because in the last one we only set up an upgraded version of our standard turret. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. So as you can see, I'm here in Unity, and what I want to begin with is just adding these upgraded versions so we can totally close off our upgrade system. You can see currently if we hit play here and create a standard turret, we can easily upgrade that. But if we do the same with our missile launcher, it says that the upgrade price is 0 and it's just going to disappear off the map with a null reference exception because we haven't referenced an upgraded object. So let's go into our prefabs folder here, let's find our missile launcher and let's hit Ctrl D to duplicate that. And let's call this one missile launcher upgraded. And let's drag this into our map, and we can just kind of style this differently and give it some different properties over here. So the first thing that I want to do is bump up the scale to 1.2 on all the axes. And then I want to up the range to something like 40. The fire rate to something like 0.4, and everything else we're just going to leave as is. You can also include a new missile if you wanted to fire something that looks a bit different. You might want to make it bigger or totally red or do something like that, but I think we're just going to keep this as is for now. And the next thing that I wanted to do with this is change the materials a tiny bit to just kind of recolor it and make it really clear that it's now a new separate thing. So in order to do this, I actually don't want to change any of the materials. I just want to flip this material here for the tip and on this material here for the head. So you can see over here we have a primary and a secondary material, and then they are currently under imports and then missile launcher and materials. And you can see I played around with having an upgraded folder here. We're just going to delete that. And basically, I just want to drag our primary into the first slot instead of the second one, and our secondary into the second slot instead of the first one. And that is just switch the two. And it's maybe kind of a hack, but I think it looks fairly decent, especially if we zoom out a little. It makes it really, really clear that something else is going on with this turret. So let's just hit apply on that and remove this. And now we can go into our shop, which is under overlay canvas and then shop. And in here we have the shop script, which has a missile launcher and all the data for that. And here we need to reference our new prefab that we just made, the missile launcher upgraded, along with adding a cost, and that's going to be something like 150. You could easily automate the cost to just be a percentage of the original cost, but I like to have more control. So now we can go in here, hit play, select our missile launcher, build it, and we can now easily upgrade it as well. And that just works. Awesome. And I basically just want to do the same thing for the missile launcher. So let's take our missile launcher, or the laser beamer. So let's duplicate our laser beamer and let's do underscore upgraded once again. Let's move this into our scene so we can easily see our edits. And let's change the range here to something like 30. And let's also change the damage over time to say 40 and the slow amount to something like 0.8. I want this to be really noticeably better. Then we can hit apply on that. And I also kind of want to bump up the size of this laser here. So let's just change the start width from 0.3 to 0.4 and do the same on the end width, just to make that a tiny bit bigger. And also we can make the turret itself bigger, so let's do a scale of 1.2 again on all the axes. And we can also go under the impact effect and just edit this a tiny bit. So if we focus on it, you can see what that looks like, and it's a really nice effect. We can go under glow and change the start size to be between 3 and 4 instead of 2 and 3, and just bump up the range on the light to something like 15 instead of 10. Cool. That's pretty much all we need to edit for this, I believe. So we can just hit apply now and again remove it off the map, and then we can find our shop and reference it. So in here under our laser beamer, we want the upgrade cost to be somewhere around 200, maybe even 250. Actually, I think I'm gonna go for 250. And let's take our upgraded prefab, the laser beamer upgraded here, and put it in there. So now when we hit play, we should be able to upgrade this as well. So let's spawn in a laser beamer and hit upgrade. And you can see that indeed that works just fine. However, I want to recolor this a tiny bit. So let's just take our upgraded here, have a look at it. And instead of again modifying the original materials, this time I want to basically just find our laser beamer. Is this floating? This is for some reason floating. So I think the fact that we scaled this up made it float a tiny bit. So what we'll do is just take these elements here, the base and the pot to rotate. And I think we'll just move those down a bit, something like that, just to make sure that it will stay on the node, even though we've sized it up. So now we can go on our imports, and then you can see I've already created a folder for this earlier, but let's just delete that. Let's duplicate the entire materials folder, and let's call this one materials upgraded. And now we can go ahead and swap all of these out. So let's go under the base first, and we change the bolts here and the base to the new base. Then we can take our head and change the pipe, the main turret, and the turret accent. There we go. And currently we can't notice a difference, but now we can go in and actually change these materials, and it will only affect this version. And pretty much all I want to do is take the pipe here and make these green. And I want them to be a very bright, saturated green, something like that. And I also want to kind of go in and change the bolts here to be green as well. I think that could be a pretty cool little detail. Something like that. And I might want to change the accent even. So let's find our turret accent. And let's just try this in green as well. I actually really like that. It's more simple, but it's very noticeably different. So let's hit apply, and let's remove this. And remember, you don't have to just change the materials or just change the properties. You can change anything about the turret. You can change the bullet, the prefab that spawned, anything about the effects. And you can even make a totally new model with different animation and put that in there instead, because we're just hot swapping out a game object. So now let's just try this one last time and see that all of our turrets are working. So let's do one of each, and let's just try and upgrade them. That looks nice. Okay, so they all look really awesome in their new upgraded versions. Cool. So next up is the selling part. So what do we want to do here? Well, so far on each node, we have a node script, and inside of this script we have functionality we have callbacks that register when our mouse is hovering over it. We have callbacks that register when let me just close down all of this stuff. When we click on it, and we have different stuff that happens when we do. So we have something called build turret, a method that builds a new turret. We have another one that upgrades the current turret. And in line with these functions, let's add a new one called sell turret. And what we want to do in here is, of course, destroy the current turret, add on some amount of money, and maybe also some kind of effect. So let's start by adding on some money. So let's go into player stats, and let's do .money, and let's add on to this some amount of the cost. So I think here we're just going to automate it. You can go in and put a sell amount for each individual turret, but I think for now we'll just take half of the purchase price. So we're going to ignore upgrades, and we're going to ignore everything else about the turret. The amount that it sells for is just going to be half what we originally bought it for. So and that is of course stored inside of our turret blueprint. So this is our current turret, and we can just do turret blueprint.cost and then multiply that with say 0.5. But we might want to get the cost or the amount that we can sell something for multiple places. And we don't want this 0.5 to be hard coded, because then we would have to go through and remember where we wrote this code and change it in each place. So what we'll do instead is add a small helper function to our turret blueprint that returns the sell amount, how much money the turret can be sold for. So let's find our turret blueprint here and open it up. And in here, we're just going to add a quick little function. This is going to be a public, and it's not going to be void because we want to return something. We want to return an integer with the amount. And this is going to be something like get sell amount. And all we do is take our cost and we return our cost, multiply it with some value, and let's just take half of it. So in our case, we can just divide by 2. So that's pretty much all we need to do. We just cut our cost in half, and this way we can easily just in here change how we calculate this, and it's going to update in all places where we simply go turret blueprint dot get cost, get sell amount. There we go. Awesome. So what we can then do is of course destroy the turret. So we have a reference to it as the turret here. We're just going to destroy that. We're also going to set our turret blueprint equal to null. And that is pretty much it. And then we can spawn a cool effect. But we can take care of that in a second. Let's just figure out if this is working. So this function should indeed work now, but we of course need to call it somewhere as well. And we need to call it in the same place that we are calling our upgrade turret. And that is through our node UI. So our node UI here is what pops up whenever we select a turret. It has this canvas with the different UI elements for upgrading and selling. So what we do is edit this node UI. And in here, we just want to add on a new method, just like we have the public void upgrade. We also want called sell, and we just go target.sellTurret, and the target is what we are currently have selected. And then we go buildManager.instance.deselect because after selling the turret, we want to deselect any kind of nodes that we might have selected. Just the same way that we have built our upgrade method. It's the exact same thing, except instead of calling upgrade turret, we're calling sell turret. So now we just need to hook this up to a button, and we do that by going through our canvas, finding the button under buttons, the sell button here, and adding a new onClick event that references our node UI where our script is, and calls on that script calls the sell function that we just created. So now everything should be nicely hooked up. And that right there is the strength of the way that we've built this system. Because we've built it in such a clear way where our UI elements all reference this central UI script that is then able to, or that then keeps track of what we currently have selected and is able to call methods on that node. Because we are using this very modular way of building it, it's so easy to add new functionality, to modify nodes in different ways. So now we can hit play here, and hopefully we should be able to now build any kind of turret and sell it. And indeed we are, and you can see here that I spent 350. I click here and I sell, and right now it says sell for 50. That's not true. It's going to sell for 350 divided by 2, and you can see indeed it does that. So all we need to do now is just update that amount. So we're not updating the sell cost here, and that's going to be the sell amount here. We're not updating this UI element. You can see all we need to do is go in here and modify this to say something like 125 in case we are selling the missile launcher or whatever. So what we do in order to get that working is just reference it inside of our node UI and update it when we set a new target, the exact same way that we do with our upgrade cost. So we just create a public text here, and this is going to be the sell amount, and we'll reference that in the inspector. And then down here we go sell amount dot text equals, and we'll put a $ here just for fanciness, and plus target dot turret blueprint dot, and remember to use the method here, so we'll use get sell amount. And this is where our little helper method here comes in handy, because now we've already implemented the cell amount in 2 different places. And so we would already have 2 different places that we would have to update our code instead of just this central one. Cool. So that should indeed update that and everything should be working. So let's try this out. So let's find our Node UI script. Let's drag our amount here, the text object, right into that field. Let's hit play. And now let's build one of each turret and let's select them. So this one here sells for 175, this for 125, and this for 50. And we can sell them for those appropriate amounts. You can see our money went back up. Awesome. So the last thing that I wanted to do was just create some kind of sell, not animation. I wanted to create some kind of sell effect. So in order to do this, let's use an effect that we already have. And let's create the effect and then implement it in code, or the other way around. Let's do the coding thing first. So in order to do this, all we need to do is find the place in our node where we sell the turret. And you can see we've already made a comment here. So we want to do the exact same thing as when we're instantiating an effect up here when building it. So let's just duplicate that code. And all we're doing is instantiating build manager dot, and then instead of build effect, we want to have a new reference called a sell effect. And we'll create that in a second. And we get the build position, which is also the sell position, which is the central point for our turret. We have a quaternion dot identity, which is just a rotation of none. And then we destroy that effect after 5 seconds. So let's now go, and that's basically all we need to do here. So let's just go into our build manager and we'll find that in our scripts folder here, the build manager. And let's add just another public game object here. So public game object, and this is going to be our sell effect. Cool. So that was all we needed to do in code. So now we can just build this inside of Unity. So let's go into prefabs and let's base this around our build effect. And let's rename this one to sell effect and create a new prefab out of it. And let's have a look at our particles here. So these particles are, let's turn on looping here and let's simulate. These particles are floating upwards. And since it's kind of a semi-positive thing that is happening, it is something kind of intangible, the fact that you are getting coins. Let's have the same effect, but now let's color it differently so it's clearly coins or some kind of money or gold that is floating upwards. So let's create a new material for this, and let's, instead of let's just actually duplicate the build effect, and let's call this one the sell effect. And inside of our particles, we then want to reference that sell effect. So under the renderer, drag in the sell effect under the material field. And we can now select this material and we can make it kind of orange yellowish. We want no metallicness. We want to kind of bump up the smoothness, and I want to saturate this more. Something like that looks pretty nice. Let's just, no metallicness, that's not good. And let's also give it a tiny bit of emission, because when we give it some emission, it's going to have this very nice glowy feel. And it's not actually going to illuminate the map, it's just going to give us this nice color on the material. And let's give it an emission of say 0.3. So let's see what that looks like. I think that's a pretty nice combination between reacting to the light in our scene and actually emitting shadows as well, and then still having that glowy feel. I kind of also want to add some particle effect that is thrown to the ground, because our turret is currently just dematerializing and just disappearing in an instant. Let's create the illusion that some parts of the turrets that it's being split up into parts and falling down. So in order to do that, let's use another effect that we already have lying around. And we could maybe use the bullet would be a pretty good one. We could also use one for destroying enemies. So we have the enemy death effect here. And I think this can very easily be modified to suit our needs. So of course we don't want this to be a prefab a prefab right now. And so I believe that we could just hit revert here. Nope. How is it that we disconnect this from being a prefab? I actually never really do this. So it's kind of, you know what we'll do? We'll just trick this. So delete that, and then we can go in here and we can create a new object, and we can just paste that component in there, and it won't have an effect on the prefab. There we go. So let's reset the transform on that. And this one is going to be kind of the debris. And let's simulate this. That already looks pretty good. Let's put on looping here so we can see what's going on. And of course we want this to have a different material as well, because this one is made for our enemies, and that is pretty clear. And let's actually maybe also bump down the emission a tiny bit to be between 10 and 15. I think that's enough. Actually, no. Let's just go full particle overboard. So this is the debris, and let's find a material that matches here. So we could actually just go ahead and use one of the materials that we use on our turrets. And then, in fact, I think we should just do that. So let's go into imports, under the standard turret. Let's find our materials here, and let's find our main color. This gray tinted a tiny bit blue color. And let's drag that in there and see how that looks. So I think that looks pretty good. It definitely gives the impression that there's some kind of debris lying around. So now let's try and hit, let's select these particle systems and turn off looping. That's a pretty important part. And let's try and hit play. Let's try and hit apply. And let's now delete this prefab. And let's also reference it. So inside of our game master is where our build manager sits. And now we just need to drag in our new cell effect into the empty slot. And yeah, let's try and hit play. And let's try and sell something. So I actually really like the effect we have going on here. It's really subtle, but it's just, there's something there and it feels nice. I do think, however, that I want to modify it a tiny bit more before we close up here. So let's find our cell effect here. The debris, I'm not totally satisfied with this. I want to move it up a bit, first of all. That's okay. And then we can take and edit the shape here a tiny bit. I want to maybe do this in a hemisphere shape. And I want to rotate this by -90. So it kind of shoots upwards a little bit, and I maybe also want to add a tiny bit of speed, so something like between 1 and 5. That's a bit better, just to give it a bit of bounciness, like that. That's a bit better. And then let's also modify the material for this. So let's create a separate one. Changed my mind, so let's create a separate one, create material, and this is going to be our cell effect, and this is going to be the debris. And this is going to be our cell effect, which is going to be our gold. So this is going to be our gold. There we go. And let's take our debris and drag it into the renderer to replace here. There we go. And let's simulate and pause so we can see what's going on here. And let's adjust this. So a bit of metallicness maybe, down with the smoothness. And then we're going to need some blue tinted kind of grayish color. Something like that is pretty nice. I think the other one was simply too black. So let's try and hit apply on that, hit play, see what this feels like. So let's try and sell that. And I actually really like this effect now. That's perfect. It might even be a tiny bit too bright. So let's just try and do that. And now I won't fiddle with this anymore. I guess it makes for a bad video if I just sit here adjusting settings. So we'll take our game over script and our node UI and drag that under the scripts, and we'll have one last view of what this effect looks like. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. I definitely think that these features, the UI here, some selling and some upgrading, are very central to almost any tower defense game. So it feels nice to have them in here. And if you have any other suggestions as to what I might cover, definitely leave them in the description or in the comment section down below, because this was pretty much all of the really central stuff that I wanted to cover. So yeah, let me know what you guys want to see, and without further ado, I will see you in the next video. Thanks to all of the awesome Patreon supporters who donated in October, and a special thanks to Sultan El Shadif, Faisal Marify, and James Calhoun. Become a supporter at patreon.com/Brackeys. Bye.